Buenas tardes, ladies and gentlemen. Sí, soy yo, tu conservative Neo-Rican Peter Vasquez. Yep, yet again, aquí on the WYSL studios. See, and I think we even got La Voz de Libertad somewhere lurking around there in these airways. You around there, sir? Hey, I didn't mean to wake you up. I know you were taking nap times here. Oh man, I'll tell you, Bob, if I can take 8 naps a day, I would be so much more productive. I mean, I won't be around to do the work, but no, absolutely, absolutely. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm not in studio. I'm at a secret location. So, Senor Bob, thank you for joining me on this stuff. I really do appreciate it. Hey, Bob, and listeners, did you guys know that in 1620, right today, September 6th, in 1620, the Mayflower departed Plymouth, England, with 102 pilgrims to America? Yeah, yeah, I haven't been there yet, although I visited some places, but not there. Anywho, I thought that was kind of cool talking about this time. What is that? This time or this point in time in the past, right? U.S. President William McKinley was shot by anarchist Leon Kozlowski. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I surely can't pronounce it. That's a challenge for me. But that happened right here in Buffalo, New York, which 8 days later is when Theodore Roosevelt became the 26th president. Yes, indeed. Yeah, yeah. And this, I guess I learned this in history, and it's something that I think everybody should know because again, today, September 6th, back in 1941, the Nazi Germany issued a decree that all Jews over the age of 6 in occupied territories had to wear a yellow Star of David for identification. That was like 1941. I think both my parents were born by 1941, or maybe my mother was being born around that time. But it's crazy to me. Can you imagine what? I mean, talk about the Scarlet Letter. uh, Yes, yes, yes. I'm sure he would probably like to see the Star of David worn on people. So that, I mean, really, what would be the point other than targeting them? Remember back during COVID here in the United States, I mean, we didn't have to wear a star or a scarlet letter per se. But I mean, they were talking about some crazy stuff for people to ensure that they were vaccinated, very similar to a Star of David worn on your shirt so everybody can see who you are. Yes, they were. Yes, they were, ladies and gentlemen. So today I want to continue the conversation. Yesterday we talked, kind of some of what's going on around New York State. We talked a little bit about our shootings. We had a couple caller, even Dan called. Dan, listen, if you're listening and you want to call and make a point, that's phenomenal. Just try not to get into an argument with us because that's just not something we're going to do on this show, at least. I do believe, ladies and gentlemen, in dialogue. I believe in opposing views, right? Allows for discussion to happen. But when you start, when you start attacking, it's just ridiculous. Let's base it on facts or even your opinion if you have an opinion. But let's keep it concise, right? But looking back in 1941, right, when the Jews, I mean, I talked a lot about trickery, and I talk a lot about trickery on this show, especially during this election cycle, because this is when we see some of the most astonishing things, I guess I have to say. This is the time of year that we start seeing money. I remember I remember we were trying to get my mother's bathroom. She has Parkinson's, and we're trying to get it situated for for convenient for her to get in, an accessible tub, and we were made aware of some money that may have been available, and so we looked into it because my parents were on a fixed income, and it took over a year to get during a presidential year, but come to find out anything coming out of the Fed was kind of put on hold, Bob. And this was, I believe, during one of Obama's races. It may have been his reelection. And, I'm like, well, why would they? But see, that created such a strangle for people that were in need, that were told that there was money out there. And, basically what happened is money's on hold, right? And then this narrative was created that the Republicans also so nasty bad, these conservatives, they just want to take away from you, and it worked. Obviously he got elected, right? But they were putting people in need and then singing, these we're going to do this and we're going to do that, and I'm looking from the back thinking to myself, wow, these people are literally manipulating behaviors by withholding money during an election cycle. And that's kind of what we've seen. And then on the opposite side, like we saw recently, Sandra Brook, right? I mean, where she gave a ton of, was it $3 million or something like that? And listen, I'm not going to lie, she gave it to a good organization. That organization's been around for a while. If I remember correctly, Willow does deal with domestic violence issues, a real issue that we have to deal with in our society, unfortunately. And it's not just women getting beat anymore, man. I'll tell you, there's some guys that I've met over the years that, boy, I'll tell you, but those are the good guys that will never hit a woman back. So anyways, that, at least that's going somewhere where I can say, okay, they can use the money. But why does it have to happen in election cycles? Why does it, why is it that the governor is signing into law legislation that sounds even a little bit conservative, and we know she's not? Oh, we're protecting our public employees by signing this legislation into law so that they can be notified. I mean, whatever, that's all malarkey. Why were you part of the regime and never spoke against removing Section 50A to begin with? Because guess what? That would have eliminated this whole law from coming up. And her own people are saying, yeah, you know what? That is a problem, because now it's going to make it difficult for us to be able to get those records when they repealed 50A. But you see the trickery, and I mentioned just a little bit yesterday, and we're going to go a little bit deeper into some other trickery that's going on, that's being used with money and words. I mean, listen, it kills me when these politicians talk words like democracy, right? 346 3000. The United States of America is not a democracy. I don't know. I guess at best it's a form of democracy. But I recently sat at a press conference and they kept using that word. And I'm looking up there and I'm thinking, wow, this is a representation of what happens when we've taken education out of our education system, right? When all uh, well, exactly. So listen, at this press conference, Bob, I mean, they're talking about democracy this and democracy that, and how it's important for the majority to rule. Because of course, they had to bring up things like what was it? The oh, jeepers, agenda, not agenda, the whole thing under the Heritage Foundation 2025. The name was it called agenda? I don't know. Well, yeah, whatever it is that, because that seems to be the only topic now, even though Trump and others have said, listen, I don't even know what that is. I've read most or the 900 some odd pages, and I didn't see what they were talking about. But that's it. But they keep talking about it's an attack on democracy. Hey, listen, we're going to pick up this conversation when we come back after these bills are paid. 346 3000. Remember, it is about dialogue. So pick up that finger, dial that number 346 3000. And hey, don't forget, you're listening to Peter Vasquez, your conservative New Rican y La Voz de Libertad. We'll be right back right here on all the WYSL stations. Muchas gracias, señor. And oh my God, the trickery just doesn't stop. You couldn't have said it better when you were announcing our sponsors. Do you know that on September 6th, in 1997, the funeral for Diana, the Princess of Wales, was held in London? I remember when she passed away. I always wondered if that was kind of like a Machiavelli thing, like she was going to reappear someday as a humble servant who just wanted to get away from the limelight. I was much younger back in 1997, Bob. Definitely much more. But but I don't even think I think I had all my white hair used to be red. I'm I don't know if every white-haired individual, was red before, but that happened to me. I had red hair back then. That's why I remember that funeral. You did, huh? I'll try to figure out how to explain that at some point in the future. I'm playing politician right now, in case you didn't notice, right? The trickery. That's what this conversation. I want people to be able to see what's going on, Bob, and be like, you know what? The burden of proof falls on you. So, for example, Bob, if we remember, and I touched on this a little yesterday, we couldn't get into it because, boy, I'll tell you, time flies when you're having a lot of fun. Ladies and gentlemen, 346 3000. But at the Democratic National Convention, Bob, our Governor Hocus Pocus, right? Yes, that stutter. It's because it's so. I try to say her name, it just doesn't come out. She said, and people listen. She said that the current buffoon and the vice buffoon in the White House today, right, simultaneously, she's acknowledging that they are the best thing since Swiss cheese for our economy, Bob. I mean, like she's like literally saying, "Oh yeah, they are the best." Look, let's see if I got a quote here. She acknowledges that many Americans are still struggling. This is the part that trips me out, right? But she says that the decline in inflation, the lower interest rates, the rising job growth, all that truly signifies a strong economy. But what gets me is that in her state, she's got some of the poorest neighborhoods in the country. The, well, that was my metaphor. No, I don't think she's a magician. She's not a good, she's not very good at. But Bob, when was the last time that Again, this is like repeated information, right? So it's kind of like people know this. But the fact that these elected officials go up there and they say, "Man, we've created a lot of jobs." But Bob, you talk to a lot of people. When was the last time you've been somewhere and someone was like, "Wow, I have the job of my dreams," or "I have a career for that matter"? Because not too often. Oh, I mean, I must be one of those weirdos that go out there and ask people weird questions, right? Hey, hey, those are fighting words, Bob. I thought you liked me. But you know what though, to suggest that there is, no politics in the things that we do or whatever. Listen, we all have to play a certain level of politics and understand that in order to be effective. I mean, I believe in negotiation. Otherwise, what we have is ideology. But what gets me in her statement, though, and this is one of the things that troubles me from the Bidenomics, as they I proudly refer to it themselves, if there is zero um, accountability for or even program, there's not even any much funds available to start teaching things like personal responsibility and fiscal discipline within the political system. See, you hear her talk all the time about cutting. I mean, she just readdressed her entire budget to accommodate asylees, as she likes to her and AOC likes to refer to them, right? Asylees, yeah, they do. Yeah, it is. And listen, I know in housing we've been struggling, man. And what really kills me is through the entire budget process, I kept hearing a lot of organizations saying things like, "Oh, we've got to go rally for this, we've got to rally for that." And I remember a few shows ago, these are the same people that won't support a solid piece of legislation that comes from anything that's aside of those in charge. This is their words, right? We don't want to upset those in power. So, I start thinking, I'm like, well, wait a minute. If those people are in power and they have full control to the point where you don't want to upset them, then why are they making you jump through hoops instead of just allocating funds as it should be allocated for a problem that even the governor has acknowledged is an emergency in this state? Anywho, ladies and gentlemen, these are questions. It's an election cycle. Your legislators in the state and Senate are up for election. That's why we're having these discussions. See, but let's look at, and we talked about this yesterday. See, but I want to talk a little bit more about some statistics behind this, because when you look at like Letitia James, for example, the AG, who happens to be a millionaire as well, going after a former president, campaigned on going after a former president. Now, listen, this isn't a stump for Trump. I'm sure some people will be like, oh, look at him stumping for Trump. That isn't the case. But when we look at things like a Gallup poll from 2022, I think I shared this yesterday, that shows that only 47% in the judicial system feels that our judicial system is solid, right? When just decades ago, 80% of our Americans, right, had faith in our judicial system. When we look at the perception of bias against Trump in a 2022, and see if I can pronounce this, how do you say that, Bob? Quinnipiac University poll, 53% of Republicans believe that legal investigations into Trump were motivated, where only 11% saw that on the Democrat side. And the thing that gets me is how can that be? Is it really along political lines when just a couple decades ago, not even right before this shift that we saw in our judicial system, this use of a branch of government to go after a political poll? Oh yeah, listen, these are all skewed. I don't believe in a lot of these statistics, and when they don't provide the back office. So the reason why I'm bringing these numbers up again is because, like I said yesterday, right? The individual that campaigned on taking Trump down, the campaign that is actively going after Trump, that has filed criminal charges, that really these things are nuts, that have selected judges, because let's not forget the local judge, that was hand selected for that, right? And these are the kind of, but she right now took a public stance in endorsing Kamala Harris here in New York State. So another, check out this data, right? And again, ladies and gentlemen, take these for what they're worth, right? The Pew Research Center in 2022, this isn't even recent, showed that 72% of Republicans viewed Democrats as immoral, and 63% of Democrats said the same about Republicans. That is political ideology, and that is the separation that's in this country, that's a result of the political ideology that's in every office, from the county clerk's office here in Monroe County that I'm fighting against, straight up into what we're seeing in our judicial systems. So how do we fix it? Right? I'll tell you what we can do to fix it. Bob, you probably know this. Listeners, you probably know this. Unfortunately, not everybody executes this, right? There is an election. And at this election here in the United States of America, if we set aside political ideology and said, hang on a second, I'm going to pay attention, right? I'm going to pay attention, and I'm going to look at what's going on. And then I'm going to take a little bit of emotional intelligence and see how is it that I can vote this year for an individual and not a political party. At the very least, know your party affiliations, know what it means to be one or the other. Know what it means to be an independent. Because if you fall within that 72% of Republicans that view Democrats as immoral, or the 63% of Democrats that view Republicans as immoral, I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, that means that what you're looking at is a party ideology, and you haven't separated yourself as a leader. You haven't separated yourself as an independent thinker. You haven't separated yourself as an individual that's holding somebody accountable, even if you're going through the actions. See, these shows that I've put together, especially as we get closer to the elections, is to talk about this call to action because we do a lot of complaining. We have a lot of great candidates running. We have a lot of people that have said, listen, I get it. I may be running on a party line because I don't have a choice, but I'm running on a constitutional, this is for America, for we the people. Check this out. The Pew Research Center also found that 77% of Republicans believe that Democrat leaders are trying to use the legal system to punish political opponents. Well, 67% of Democrats believe that Republicans are trying to undermine democracy. Now, what we say of the narrative that's being put out, right? They're trying to sell us on democracy. Because the 77% of Americans that believe that Democrat leaders are trying to use the legal system to punish political foes, well, they're kind of right. Mira, you're listening to your conservative New Rican aquí on the next step. See, 92.1 FM, 95.5 West FM, and 1040 AM, most powerful AM right now around. See, we'll be right back right here in the next step show with the conservative New Rican. Oh yeah, baby. Oh yeah. Welcome back to the Next Step Show. See, Peter Vasquez to Conservative New York. And hey, just a quick reminder: September 27th, Murder Mystery Dinner to Wake the Dead, 6 p.m. Jack's Place Chalai Country Club. You can be all bougie, right? Call 585-314-1769 for tickets. Armando, thank you for calling the Next Step Show. Yeah. I think each one of those points kind of hits that nail, and I agree with you. My only pushback, Armando, would be that we keep saying things like we've got to fix our politicians. In my opinion, we got to replace them. But Armando, I do have another call on hold. Hey, listen, I'm sorry. But I'm going to catch up there. I'm going to bring you back on the show in the next couple of weeks to talk about three specific things again, and the fact that really, if people just voted, I believe the honorable late Bill Noje commissioned a study that showed some 2 point something million people just don't vote. Keith, thanks for calling the Next Step Show. Oh, oh, very much so. I, I appreciate that, Keith. That means a lot to me coming from you. So, Bob, I'm just curious. I mean, this guy is entitled to having Secret Service around him at all times. how could he possibly spend in prison? I mean, I can't imagine they're going to have Secret Service agents in there. Yeah. You know what, and you mentioned you're seriously concerned, Bob, as I think most Americans are. And I think, that's why I brought up the whole endorsement that or that the AG gave Kamala, because again, as she's sitting here pushing these things and then turning around and giving a presidential endorsement like that from a very powerful office, and then at the same token, trying to tie it to race and all this other nonsense that she's trying to do. That's trickery, ladies and gentlemen. And listen, I don't care what party affiliation you're with. That needs to concern you. And listen, it could be the other way around. I mean, I don't think so, but it could be. I'll be fighting avidly against that too. Uh, hmm. Now that's an interesting statement. No, but I believe that's true because I don't remember catching. Yeah, very odd. Ladies and gentlemen, see, listen, you can call it conspiracy, you can call it whatever, but when you can't tie things together at some point, we need to sit back and say, whoa, wait a minute. And again, all you got to do is look around us. Look at Venezuela, right? Look at Cuba way back when. Well, we just talked about Germany's back in, was it 1941, forcing Jews. It's there, ladies and gentlemen. These aren't things we're making up. But hey, I thought, Bob, I thought this would be a fun conversation. You may get a kick out of this, right? But New York State is lagging on its progress towards its ambitious climate goals. You remember those goals, right? Maybe 70% electric generated from renewable sources by 2030. No, of course it's not going to happen. And remember these budgets that were just passed to try to, in some cases, to accommodate the purchase of just one, two, or three buses, not even a fleet. They're 100% carbon free electric by 2040, reducing greenhouse emissions by 85% by 2050 relative to 1990. No, 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 they're not. No. So the latest studies in energy standards apparently reports that they're not on track for the 2030 insight. And check out what they cite as the causes: economic and logistical challenges. Didn't we say that before they rolled this out? Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Peter Vasquez right here in the Next Step Show on the WYSL stations. Miga, regresamos. No cambie ese dial because we still got a little more for you. Totally, totally. No, God, country, and family. I can't say that enough. See why? Because I love the United States of America. I love New York State. Okay, I'll throw in there like I did yesterday. I love my Chrissy and everything about her too, because I gotta kind of God, country, family, man. You can't forget that. And listen, though, I'm not talking about God, country, family political statement or religious statement. I'm talking about what's made America. The reason why those 102 pilgrims came to America, way back in the 1600s to form and continue to create a nation that is one nation under God, indivisible. Hey, I know I'm preaching. So, recently, I always forget his name, the goofy congressman there. I know. No, the senator actually, not the caramba, the white guy with white hair. How about that? Schumer. Yes, yes, yes. 23.7 million dollars in federal funds, right? For the city for bike paths and walking paths. But hey, Bob, did I ever tell you that when I was young, when I was a teenager, I liked watching C-SPAN? Did I ever tell you that? No, so check. So as a teenager, ladies and gentlemen, I've watched C-SPAN. I truly was amazed by what I was seeing, and what brought this thought to the forefront was when I described Schumer, right, an old white guy with white hair. But see, I dropped out of school where I grew up. There was this narrative. That just wasn't for people like me, that kind of stuff. Maybe school board, maybe something local, but that national stuff. So I would watch C-SPAN, Bob, and I would think to myself, God must have created that group of people to govern the rest of us. Because if everybody's telling me that's not for any of us, but I learned quickly though that was a bunch of malarkey. But Bob, I gotta ask, 346 it's not that funny, but it is pretty funny in retrospect. Um, 346 3000. I think we got a call because I want your opinion. Is 3.7 million dollars really the best way to spend money in a city that's facing challenges of poverty, crime, housing inability? I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but doesn't it make more sense to say, hey, bike riders, because listen, I ride bikes not as often as a biker, but I do enjoy riding bikes, and there's paths out there. Is there one in my front yard? No, of course not. Do I got to drive somewhere? Probably. But I'm okay with that if I know that the 23 point, and I think most of you would agree, Bob, I'm sure you agree. If I know that the $23.7 million of federal funds, right, is going to house and make up the difference that Hocus Pocus took away in services for our veterans, I would be okay with loading the bike in my car and going somewhere to ride a bike on a bike path. Like they do in, yeah. And I'm glad you bring that up, Bob, because see, when we look at it from a perspective, because again, these are the people that are out there, equitable distribution, equality, inclusivity, it's got to serve the poor, all that other stuff, right? And you can agree with it, but see, again, part of the trickery, you brought up a perfect statement. Based on that, right? Who would this 20, and you're right, it is not a lot of money, but it can help a lot of people. 23.7 million isn't even being used for road repair or construction. It's literally just to create these bike and walk paths. But like you mentioned, it's going to, is it really going to serve people in the inner city? Is it really going to serve people on Clinton Avenue or in Jefferson or on Joseph or on Hudson, where bike paths is a death trap? The way, well, I mean, we see it on TV. We see what's happening. Anyways, Bob, I really, yeah, yeah. While paying an enormous amount of money to, I'm sure, people that are somehow tied to, what do you call them, chuckles? I mean, remember, I had a few shows ago, I had an individual in here who was, who keeps putting together the basketball courts, right, out of his own money. And they apparently spend over $1 million on that just a few years ago. Remember that? Yeah, over at Don Samuel Torres Park. I can't remember the name of the school across the street, but all right, Bob, I really, because you've been around just uh, of high beams. Yeah. And you brought up those bikes. I do. I see them, they're thrown all over the city. They don't even have racks anymore. They must be like solar powered or something, because people literally are taking them. Actually, someone told me recently they were in a fight because they went to go use one. And apparently, whoever lived in the house in front of where the bike was came out, ready to fight because they, they were taking that public bike. Oh, very much so. Oh, all over the place, all over, and that there's not even helmets used and so forth. Thank you. So Bob, in the last few minutes, I don't know if there's time for a call. I guess if you have like a 10-second call, but I do want to bring up that whole Chinese spy that we had in New York State, working for both Governor Cuomo. And Governor Hochul, two very corrupt governors. Hocus pocus is why I call her that. But Bob, two administrations. Now listen, I get people can be sneaky, but as I understand it, she wasn't even indicated or found to be doing anything wrong by either administration. And of course, hocus pocus, when she started talking about it in her news conference, she blamed it on Cuomo. Of course, she let him get away with seven allegations of sexual harassment, right? But she blames this on him. But see, this woman though was found out by the FBI and others by some of her spending habits, luxury items, buying Ferraris. Now, listen, I am by far right not God's gift to leadership, but I got to ask you, if Bob D'Angelo shows up at your station with a Ferrari, would you think to ask him where that came from or how he afforded it? I mean, yeah, and you would think that, okay, and that's a private industry, right? So you would think in government, you're like, well, wait a minute. I know where your pay is, and I know that your pay isn't more than the working man out there at an equivalent rate, right? Maybe less than your counterpart on the civilian side, on the business side, on the corporate side, right? So I think that would be noticeable. So that leads me to the final point that I want to make today, ladies and gentlemen, on trickery, right? Because, like I say it at the end of every show, I'll say it again today. It's all about leadership, and it starts and ends with the person that we voted to take on the role of representing us. There is absolutely an expectation of leadership, right? And leadership requires us to help mush that person. Al, if you're listening, I got your email, but I am going to disagree with you on that one because it is about leaders. See, when I hire an employee, I'm hiring a leader. I'm hiring someone who's going to take ownership over the job that I hired him to do, right? That is leadership. You create that. And right now, claiming that it's Governor Cuomo's fault that I had this person that has done crazy, horrible things, that's a lack of leadership. And that is exactly the role models that we have. And we even see it in the county clerk's office. Ladies and gentlemen, be a leader, be a leader, be a leader. Say it with me. Leadership is the beacon that guides me, for it's through selfless service that I illuminate the way for others to find their own greatness. Y mira, nunca te olvide, la voz de libertad, sí, the conservative New Yorker on the Next Step Show, Peter Vasquez, siempre, siempre te amamos. You too, my friend.